Blood tinged the pristine snow crimson as Josephine Blackwell drifted in and out of consciousness, the cruel December winds of 1883 cutting through her tattered coat like a knife. Her husband's final words echoed in her fading thoughts. "You're more trouble than you're worth, Josie." Then the gunshot, her body tumbling from their wagon into the mounting blizzard, and his silhouette disappearing into the white void. Josephine had never expected to die this way, betrayed, abandoned, and freezing on the unforgiving trail between Silver Reef, Utah, and their homestead. The blood seeping from her shoulder numbed in the biting cold, her wedding ring a bitter weight on her finger. 22 years old, and already a widow, though not in the way most became one in these harsh territories. She tried to stand, collapsed, and watched through fluttering eyelids as the snow built up around her body. The flakes, once so beautiful to her when she'd arrived from Philadelphia just 18 months ago, now seemed like silent pallbearers. The blizzard swallowed her desperate cries for help, muting them to whispers no human ear could hear. Miles away, Ethan Yates pulled his hat lower against the blinding snow, cursing his decision to delay his return to his ranch outside Silver Reef. The cattle buyers in town had been eager to negotiate, and the extra money would see him comfortably through winter, but now he risked freezing to death for his troubles. His horse, Drummer, trudged doggedly through the deepening drifts, both man and beast knowing that stopping meant certain death. "Just a few more miles, boy," Ethan murmured, his words instantly swept away by the howling wind. It was then that Drummer faltered, his ears perking forward despite the storm. The horse nickered softly, veering slightly off their path. "What is it?" Ethan squinted through the wall of white, trusting his horse's instincts more than his own senses in this blinding maelstrom. Drummer moved purposefully now, and Ethan loosened his grip on the reins. After several yards, the horse stopped abruptly, pawing at something in the snow. Ethan dismounted, his boots sinking knee-deep into the powder. What he found made his blood run cold despite the biting weather. A woman lay half-buried, her blonde hair splayed like a halo against the white. Blood had frozen on her dress and coat, creating macabre crystalline patterns. Her skin held the blue tinge of approaching death, but when Ethan pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt a faint, fluttering pulse. "Madam, can you hear me?" he called, gently brushing snow from her face. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, revealing glazed blue eyes that struggled to focus. "Don't worry, I've got you," Ethan said, though he doubted she could hear him. He quickly assessed her injury, a gunshot wound to the shoulder, partially clotted by the cold. This was no accident. Someone had shot her and left her to die. With careful movements, he wrapped her in his heavy buffalo coat and lifted her onto Drummer. The horse whinnied in protest at the additional weight, but Ethan hushed him. "I know, boy, but she won't make it another hour out here." Ethan mounted behind her, cradling her limp body against his chest. His ranch was closer than town, their only chance. He turned Drummer toward home, praying they would make it before the storm worsened or the woman's life slipped away. Josephine drifted through darkness, occasionally surfacing to fragmented awareness. Warmth against her back, the rhythmic movement of a horse, a deep voice murmuring reassurances she couldn't quite comprehend, then darkness again, longer and deeper. When she next opened her eyes, she was enveloped in unfamiliar warmth. A crackling fire cast dancing shadows on rough-hewn log walls. Heavy quilts weighed down on her body, and a dull, throbbing pain radiated from her shoulder. Panic surged through her as memories flooded back Vernon's cold eyes, the flash of his revolver, the endless white of the blizzard. "Vernon," she gasped, attempting to sit up only to fall back with a cry of pain. "Easy there," came a gentle but firm voice. A man moved into her field of vision, tall, broad-shouldered, with intense green eyes and several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. "You're safe now." "Where am I? Who are you?" Josephine croaked, her throat parched and raw. "Name's Ethan Yates. This is my ranch about 8 miles outside Silver Reef." He poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and carefully helped her drink. "Found you half buried in the snow during the blizzard. You've been out for nearly 2 days." Josephine winced as she swallowed. 2 days. Ethan nodded, his expression grave. "You nearly died out there. Bullet went clean through your shoulder. Missed anything vital, but you lost a fair amount of blood before the cold slowed the bleeding." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "Want to tell me how you ended up shot and left for dead in a blizzard?" Tears welled in Josephine's eyes, the full weight of Vernon's betrayal crashing over her. "My husband," she whispered. "He shot me and left me there." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "Your husband did this. Does he have a name?" Vernon Blackwell. The name felt like poison on her tongue. Ethan's expression darkened. "I know of him. Has a homestead north of town, keeps to himself mostly." He studied her face. "You're Josephine Blackwell, then. I've seen you in town a few times." Josephine nodded weakly. "Everyone calls me Josie." Her voice broke. "He said I was worthless, that he never should have married me, that I was barren and useless to him." The admission brought fresh tears, humiliation burning her cheeks. "Madam, no man worth his salt does something like this," Ethan said firmly. "Don't you believe a word of what that snake told you?" A violent coughing fit seized Josephine, pain shooting through her injured shoulder. Ethan quickly supported her back, helping her sip more water. "The storm's still raging outside," he explained. "Roads to town are impassable. Doc Jenkins can't get out here, so I did my best with your wound. I've some experience patching up injuries from my time scouting for the Army." He adjusted the quilts around her. "You need rest and warmth. We'll figure everything else out once you're stronger." Josephine wanted to protest, to demand they alert the sheriff immediately, but exhaustion pulled at her eyelids. "Thank you," she murmured, "for finding me before the cold finished what Vernon started." Ethan merely nodded, his expression somber. As Josephine drifted back to sleep, she heard him stoke the fire and felt the weight of another blanket being laid gently over her. For the first time since the gunshot, she felt safe, a strange feeling, given that she was in the home of a man she barely knew. The next 3 days passed in a blur of fever and pain for Josephine. Ethan proved to be a diligent caretaker, changing her bandages, preparing simple broths and teas, and keeping the cabin warm despite the howling blizzard outside. When her fever broke on the 4th morning, she awoke feeling weak but clear-headed. Ethan was at the stove, stirring something that filled the cabin with a savory aroma. He turned when he heard her shifting in the bed. "Good morning," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Your color's better today." "How long have I been here?" Josephine asked, struggling to sit up. Ethan quickly moved to help her, placing pillows behind her back. 5 days now. Blizzard finally broke yesterday. I rode into town to let Sheriff Morgan know what happened." Fear clutched at Josephine's heart. "Did they find Vernon?" Ethan's expression hardened. "No. Looks like he packed up and fled. Sheriffs put out word to neighboring counties, but with this weather." He shook his head. "Your husband told folks in town you'd gone to visit family back east. No one questioned it." "I have no family," Josephine said quietly. "My parents died of influenza 2 years ago. Vernon was in Philadelphia on business. We met at a church social my aunt arranged." She laughed bitterly. "He seemed so charming, so steady. Said he had a beautiful home in Utah Territory waiting for a woman's touch. And instead he brought you to a half-built cabin with no neighbors for miles," Ethan guessed, ladling stew into a bowl. Josephine nodded. He changed once we were married, became cruel, controlling. She looked down at her hands. I couldn't give him children. After a year, he started saying I was useless to him. Ethan brought the stew over along with a spoon. You need to eat, regain your strength. Josephine took a small bite, surprised by how good it tasted. You're a fine cook, Mr. Yates. Ethan, he corrected with a slight smile. And necessity teaches a man many skills out here. As she ate, Josephine studied him properly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, with sun-weathered skin, and a few strands of silver threading through his brown hair at the temples. His hands were calloused but gentle, his movements efficient and purposeful. Sheriff Morgan will be by later today to take your statement, Ethan said, interrupting her observations. Doc Jenkins is coming too to check your wound properly. Josephine set down her spoon. And after that? After that, Ethan echoed. Where am I to go? I have no money of my own. The homestead belongs to Vernon. The reality of her situation crashed over her. I'm utterly alone. Ethan was quiet for a moment. You can stay here until you're fully recovered. After that, well, Silver Reef's got work for those willing. The Cosmopolitan Hotel often needs help, and Mrs. Cartwright at the general store mentioned needing an assistant. Tears welled in Josephine's eyes at his kindness. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Ethan said simply. I know you didn't deserve what happened to you, and I know what it's like to be alone in this world. He cleared his throat. Besides, out here we help each other. It's how we survive. Before Josephine could respond, there was a knock at the door. Ethan rose to answer it, admitting a stout, white-haired man with spectacles and a black leather bag. Dr. Jenkins, Ethan greeted him, and Sheriff Morgan, good to see you both made it through safely. The doctor immediately approached Josephine, his manner brisk but kind. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm Dr. Samuel Jenkins. Let's have a look at that shoulder, shall we? The examination was painful but thorough. Dr. Jenkins praised Ethan's initial treatment, declaring the wound clean and healing well, though he cautioned Josephine about using her arm too strenuously for at least another few weeks. Sheriff Morgan, a weathered man with a silver mustache, sat at Ethan's small table and took detailed notes as Josephine recounted the events leading to her abandonment in the blizzard. His expression grew increasingly grim. Mrs. Blackwell, I've put out alerts for your husband's arrest, but I won't lie to you, the territory is vast, and if he's crossed into Nevada or Arizona, it complicates matters. He closed his notebook. In the meantime, do you have somewhere to stay? The church ladies might be able to arrange something in town. Before Josephine could respond, Ethan spoke up. She's welcome here until she's recovered, Sheriff. I can sleep in the barn. It's no trouble. Sheriff Morgan raised an eyebrow but nodded. Very well. Doctor, do you see any issue with that arrangement? Moving her now would only risk reopening the wound, Dr. Jenkins stated. Mr. Yates has proven himself quite capable thus far. I'll check in again in a week. After they departed, a heavy silence fell over the cabin. Josephine felt a crushing weight of gratitude and embarrassment. You didn't have to offer your home, she said softly. Especially not your bed. I can't put you out in the barn during winter. Ethan shrugged. The barn's plenty warm with the animals. I've slept in worse places. Still, it isn't proper, Josephine insisted. People will talk. Let them, Ethan said, his tone matter of fact. Would you rather be the subject of gossip or dead in a snowbank? Put so bluntly, Josephine couldn't argue. At least let me earn my keep. I can cook, mend, keep house once my arm is stronger. Ethan's expression softened. We'll see. For now, your job is to heal. The following days established a tentative routine. Ethan would rise before dawn to tend to his livestock, a modest herd of cattle, 2 horses, and assorted chickens. Josephine would wake to find the fire built up and coffee brewing. Despite her protests, Ethan refused to let her do much more than sit at the table while he prepared simple but hearty meals. On the 7th day after her rescue, Josephine finally convinced him to let her wash the dishes. Her shoulder ached with the movement, but the small accomplishment felt like a victory against Vernon's attempt to destroy her. "You're stubborn," Ethan observed, drying the plate she handed him. "I've been told it's my least attractive quality," Josephine replied, echoing Vernon's frequent criticism. Ethan set down his towel. "Strange. I find it rather admirable." Their eyes met briefly before Josephine looked away, an unexpected warmth rising to her cheeks. She hadn't felt anything resembling attraction since the early days with Vernon, and the sensation disoriented her. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Ethan reading from a dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, while Josephine mended one of his shirts, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Snow began to fall again outside, but inside the cabin was warm, secure. "I never thanked you properly," Josephine said suddenly, setting aside her needlework. "Not just for saving my life, but for your kindness afterward. Most men wouldn't have bothered." Ethan closed his book. "Most men would have done exactly what I did." "No," Josephine said firmly. "They wouldn't." "Vernon certainly wouldn't have." Ethan's expression darkened. "Vernon Blackwell is no measure of a man. I know that now." Josephine twisted the wedding band still on her finger. "I was so naive. I believed all his promises of a better life out west. When things got bad, I kept telling myself it would improve, that he'd change back into the man I thought I'd married." She slipped the ring off, staring at it in the firelight. "I was such a fool." "You were hopeful," Ethan corrected gently. "There's no shame in that." Josephine closed her fist around the ring. "Well, hope nearly got me killed." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "My wife died of mountain fever 8 years ago," he said finally. "Caroline, we were married just shy of 2 years. I kept hoping she'd recover, even when the doctor said it was hopeless." He stared into the fire. "Sometimes hope is all we have, even when it seems foolish to others." Josephine felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry about your wife," Ethan nodded. "After she died, I joined the army as a scout. Spent 5 years tracking Utes and renegades through this territory. When I mustered out, I used my pay to buy this land." He gestured around the modest cabin. "It isn't much, but it's mine." "It's a good home," Josephine said sincerely. "Warm, solid." A ghost of a smile crossed Ethan's face. "That's high praise coming from a Philadelphia society lady." "Hardly society," Josephine laughed. "My father was a school teacher. We lived modestly, but there was always love in our home." Her smile faded. "I miss that most, I think, the feeling of being valued." Their eyes met across the space between them, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition of shared loneliness, perhaps. Ethan cleared his throat and stood. "It's getting late. I should head to the barn." Josephine rose too, wincing slightly at the pull in her shoulder. "Ethan, she hesitated. "Thank you for telling me about Caroline." He nodded once, donned his coat, and stepped out into the snowy night, leaving Josephine alone with thoughts more confused than they had been in months. As January gave way to February, Josephine's strength returned steadily. The wound on her shoulder healed into a puckered scar that Dr. Jenkins declared a miracle of good care and better luck. Despite Ethan's continued protests, she gradually took over more household duties, finding quiet satisfaction in restoring order to the bachelor's cabin. She discovered Ethan was a man of unexpected contradictions, rough-hewn but educated, solitary yet kind, reserved but possessed of a dry wit that occasionally surprised laughter from her. His bookshelf contained volumes of Shakespeare alongside practical guides to ranching and animal husbandry. Each evening, he would read aloud by the fire, his deep voice bringing the words to life in a way that transported Josephine far from her troubles. Word of her situation had spread through Silver Reef, as such news inevitably did in small communities. Visitors began to appear at the ranch, women from town bearing casseroles and pies, their curious eyes taking in Ethan's cabin and the young woman recovering within. Most expressed sympathy for Josephine's plight, though she detected underlying currents of judgment in some visits. "Don't mind Mrs. Peterson," Ethan said after one particularly stilted visit. "Her tongue's sharper than a new razor, but her heart's in the right place." "They all wonder what sort of woman I am," Josephine sighed, "living unchaperoned with a bachelor." "They wonder more about me than you," Ethan corrected. "Towns decided you're either a saint I rescued or a temptress leading me astray. Makes for better gossip than the truth." "Which is?" "That you're healing and I'm helping. Nothing more complicated than that." But it was becoming more complicated, at least for Josephine. Each day, she found herself more aware of Ethan's presence, the breadth of his shoulders as he chopped wood, the rare sound of his laughter, the gentleness of his hands when he occasionally checked her healing wound. At night, lying in his bed while he slept in the barn, she would catch herself wondering what it might be like to be held by him, to be loved by a man who treated her with consistent kindness. Such thoughts brought immediate guilt and shame. She was still legally married to Vernon, even if he had tried to murder her. And Ethan had never indicated any interest beyond neighborly concern. He'd loved his wife deeply, that much was clear from the reverent way he spoke of Caroline. One afternoon in mid-February, Sheriff Morgan rode out to the ranch with news. Josephine and Ethan were in the barn, Josephine feeding the chickens while Ethan repaired a bridle. "Vernon Blackwell's been spotted in Arizona territory," the sheriff announced without preamble. "Working at a silver mine near Tombstone under the name Victor Brown." Josephine's heart raced. "Are they bringing him back?" Sheriff Morgan removed his hat. "That's the thing, Mrs. Blackwell. They would, but there's been an accident. Cave-in at the mine 3 days ago. Your husband was among those killed." The news struck Josephine like a physical blow. She sank onto a hay bale, unable to process her feelings. Relief, guilt, grief for what might have been all warred within her. "You're certain it's him?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "Marshal down there sent a detailed description. Matches Blackwell right down to the scar on his chin." The sheriff handed Josephine a folded paper. "This arrived for you care of my office. Apparently, Blackwell had it on him." With trembling fingers, Josephine unfolded the paper, a bank draft for nearly $300. "I don't understand." "Wages from the mine, according to the marshal's letter, plus his personal effects sold at auction. As his widow, it's rightfully yours." Sheriff Morgan replaced his hat. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam, though given the circumstances." Josephine nodded numbly. "Thank you for bringing word, Sheriff." After the lawman departed, silence fell in the barn. Ethan kept his distance, seemingly understanding her need to process this development. "I don't know what to feel," Josephine finally admitted. "Is it wrong that my first thought was relief?" "No," Ethan said simply. "The man tried to kill you. He forfeited any claim to your grief." Josephine stared at the bank draft. "With this money, I could return to Philadelphia. My aunt might take me in." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Ethan's expression remained carefully neutral. "Is that what you want, to go back east? Was it?" Josephine considered the question honestly. Philadelphia held nothing but memories of her parents and the shame of her failed marriage. No real connections remained for her there. "No," she realized. "I don't think it is." Relief flashed briefly across Ethan's features before he schooled his expression. "Well, you've options now, Mrs. Cartwright is still looking for help at the store, and the hotel's always hiring. Silver Reef's growing. It's a good place to make a fresh start." Josephine studied him, trying to decipher what he wasn't saying. Would you mind if I stayed in the area?" Ethan met her eyes. "I reckon I'd mind considerably if you left." The quiet admission hung between them, significant and fragile. Neither seemed willing to break the moment by speaking further, but something had shifted, an unspoken boundary crossed. That evening, after a simple supper, Josephine made a decision. She placed her wedding ring in a small wooden box, along with the locket containing a curl of her mother's hair and the bank draft. "I'd like to stay another week if you'll have me," she told Ethan. "Just until I'm fully healed and can find suitable accommodations in town." Ethan nodded. "My home is yours for as long as you need it." A week stretched into 2, then 3. March brought warming temperatures and longer days. Josephine rode into town with Ethan regularly now, slowly reintegrating into the community not as Vernon Blackwell's outsider wife, but as herself. She began helping at the general store 3 days a week, earning a small wage of her own and developing a friendship with Mrs. Cartwright, a widow with a no-nonsense demeanor and kind heart. The boundaries between Ethan and Josephine gradually softened. He no longer insisted on sleeping in the barn, instead making a pallet before the fire. Their evenings were filled with conversation that ranged from books to childhood memories to tentative dreams for the future. Josephine learned about Ethan's upbringing in Missouri, his time in the Army, the circumstances that brought him to Utah Territory. In turn, she shared stories of Philadelphia, her parents, her passion for art and literature. One evening in late March, they sat on Ethan's small porch watching the sunset paint the distant red cliffs in fiery hues. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the occasional lowing of cattle. "I found a small house for rent in town today," Josephine said suddenly. "Above the milliner's shop. It's modest but clean. I can afford it with what I'm earning at the store." Ethan's profile remained impassive. "When would you move?" "Next week, perhaps. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "It's not an imposition," Ethan said quietly. Josephine turned to look at him. "People talk, Ethan. I hear the whispers when we're in town together." "Let them talk." His jaw tightened. Unless you want to leave." "It isn't about what I want," Josephine sighed. "It's about what's proper." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Josephine, do you want to leave this ranch?" The directness of his question demanded equal honesty. "No," she admitted. "I've never felt as safe, as at peace as I do here with you." Something in Ethan's expression shifted, a guardedness giving way to vulnerability. "Then don't go." Josephine's heart quickened. "What are you saying, Ethan?" He reached slowly for her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. His calloused fingers enveloped hers, warm and steady. "I'm saying I've grown accustomed to your presence, to your voice in my home, your laugh." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm saying I care for you, Josephine, more than I expected to care for anyone again." Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes. "I care for you too," she whispered. "But I'm afraid. My judgment hasn't proven reliable when it comes to men." "I understand fear," Ethan said. "After Caroline died, I didn't think I'd ever want to risk loving someone again, the prospect of that kind of loss." He shook his head. "But then I found you in that snowdrift and something changed. At first I told myself it was just concern for your welfare. Then it was appreciation for your company." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Now I know it's more. Much more." Josephine's free hand moved to his face, tracing the line of his jaw with trembling fingers. "What if I'm still broken from what Vernon did?" "Then we heal together," Ethan said simply. Day by day. No rushing, no pressure. The last light of the setting sun gilded his features as he leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, Josephine closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they parted, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as my guest, but as—" "Yes," Josephine interrupted, knowing what he was asking. "Yes, I'll stay." Spring brought renewal to the land and to Josephine's heart. April showers transformed the desert landscape into a brief riot of wildflowers. Ethan taught her to ride properly, laughing at her initial nervousness, but never mocking her. Together they visited his grazing lands, picnicked by hidden springs, and gradually expanded the boundaries of their growing relationship. They were careful, mindful of propriety despite their deepening feelings. Ethan continued to sleep before the fire, though their goodnight kisses grew increasingly difficult to end. Josephine knew gossip still circulated in town, but found herself caring less with each passing week. The women who had initially judged her now included her in their sewing circles and church socials. Mrs. Cartwright became a stalwart friend and advocate, declaring to anyone who would listen that Josie and Ethan Yates are good people, and what they do on their own property is nobody's business but theirs. By May, Josephine had saved enough from her store wages and Vernon's mine payment to purchase fabric for new curtains and tablecloths for Ethan's cabin. She took great satisfaction in transforming the utilitarian space into something warmer, more inviting. Ethan watched her domestic efforts with amusement and evident appreciation. "You're nesting," he observed one evening as she arranged wildflowers in a tin can on the table. Josephine blushed. "Is that a complaint?" "An observation," he corrected, coming to stand behind her. His arms encircled her waist, his chin resting on her uninjured shoulder. "I like it. Cabin hasn't felt this much like a home since I built it." She leaned back against his solid warmth. "It feels more like home than anywhere I've lived since leaving my parents' house." Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitancy, "about us, about the future." Josephine turned in his arms, heart fluttering. "Oh, I love you, Josephine," he said simply. "I think I started falling for you that first night, watching you fight to survive despite everything." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you too, Ethan. I never thought I'd trust a man again, but you've shown me what real goodness looks like." He reached into his pocket, drawing out a small object. "I rode to Cedar City last week, had this made." He opened his palm, revealing a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's. I had it reset for you." Josephine gasped softly. "Ethan, I'm asking you to marry me, Josie. Not because of what people might say or because it's proper, but because I want to build a life with you." His green eyes held hers intently. "You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need." "I don't need time," Josephine said, her voice steady despite her tears. "My answer is yes. Yes, I'll marry you, Ethan Yates." His face broke into a rare, full smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the pearl catching the evening light. When he kissed her, Josephine felt the last shadows of her past recede, replaced by the bright promise of a future with this good, steadfast man. They were married on the first Sunday in June 1884 in Silver Reef's small clapboard church. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by what seemed like the entire town. Mrs. Cartwright had helped Josephine fashion a wedding dress from pale blue fabric, adorned with lace saved from her mother's wedding gown. Ethan, unusually dapper in a new suit, looked at her with such naked adoration that several of the town matrons dabbed at their eyes. Sheriff Morgan gave the bride away, a duty he accepted with gruff emotion. "Your parents would be proud," he told Josephine before walking her down the aisle. "You've shown real courage, young lady." The celebration afterward spilled from the churchyard to the Cosmopolitan Hotel, where the owners had generously provided space and refreshments. Josephine found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of whom had initially regarded her with suspicion during her early days in Silver Reef. "You've won them over," Ethan murmured, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of punch, "just as you won me." "We won each other," Josephine corrected, accepting the drink with a smile. "I never expected to find happiness again after what happened with Vernon. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover this has all been a beautiful dream." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Not a dream, I promise you that." Late that evening, they returned to the ranch, their home now, truly shared. Ethan carried her across the threshold despite her laughing protests about his back, setting her down gently in the cabin that had become her sanctuary. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," he said softly. The name sent a thrill through her. "I like the sound of that." That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time. Ethan's tenderness erased the memories of Vernon's coldness, his patient care healing wounds deeper than the scar on her shoulder. In his arms, Josephine found not just pleasure but restoration, her body and heart learning to trust again. Afterward, lying in the quiet darkness with her head on his chest, Josephine traced idle patterns on Ethan's skin. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked, his fingers combing gently through her loose hair. "For finding me in that blizzard, for saving my life." She propped herself up to look at him. "For showing me what love is supposed to be." Ethan cupped her cheek. "I think we saved each other, Josie." Summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. Josephine thrived as Ethan's wife, dividing her time between helping at the ranch and continuing her work at the general store 2 days a week. Mrs. Cartwright insisted she maintain the position, declaring that a woman should always have something of her own, husband or no husband. Ethan's cattle business prospered, allowing them to hire a young ranch hand named Timothy to help with the expanding herd. They added a small room to the cabin, planning for future growth of their family. Though Josephine still harbored fears that she might be barren as Vernon had claimed, Ethan dismissed her concerns. "If we're blessed with children, we'll cherish them," he told her. "If not, we have each other, and that's more than enough." His unwavering acceptance healed something broken within her. Vernon had made her believe her worth was tied to her ability to bear children. Ethan showed her that love could be unconditional. In September, Josephine missed her monthly courses. By October, Dr. Jenkins confirmed what she'd begun to suspect: she was with child. "About 3 months along, by my reckoning," the doctor said, smiling at her shocked expression. "Everything appears normal, Mrs. Yates." "I'd say you're due in early April." Josephine could scarcely believe it. "But Vernon always said," Dr. Jenkins patted her hand. "Mrs. Yates, allow me to speak plainly. Some men find it easier to blame their wives than acknowledge their own deficiencies. There was never any medical reason to believe you couldn't conceive." The revelation staggered her. Another lie from Vernon, another way he had diminished her. She rode home in a daze, uncertain how to share the news with Ethan. Would he be pleased? Overwhelmed? They discussed children as a distant possibility, not an immediate reality. She found him mending fence in the north pasture, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the autumn chill. He spotted her approaching on her mare and waved, his smile visible even at a distance. Dismounting carefully, Josephine walked the last few yards to him. "You're back early," he observed, setting down his tools. His smile faded as he took in her expression. "What is it? Is something wrong?" Josephine shook her head, suddenly unable to find words. Instead, she took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat abdomen. Confusion crossed his face, then dawning comprehension, followed by wonder. "Josie, are you saying?" She nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "We're going to have a baby. Next April." Ethan's expression transformed with joy so pure it took her breath away. He lifted her carefully, spinning her in a circle before setting her down and kissing her soundly. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby. You're happy then?" She asked, still needing the reassurance. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He dropped to his knees before her, pressing his cheek to her abdomen. "I never thought I'd be a father after Caroline died." He trailed off, overcome. Josephine ran her fingers through his hair. "We're both getting second chances we never expected." The pregnancy progressed well through the winter months. Josephine bloomed under Ethan's attentive care, her body rounding with new life. The women of Silver Reef rallied around her, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby items. Mrs. Cartwright organized a sewing circle specifically to create a layette for the coming child. Christmas was especially meaningful that year. Ethan surprised Josephine with a handcrafted cradle, lovingly made during secret hours in the barn. She wept when he presented it, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of his love for their unborn child. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her hands over the smooth wooden curves. "My father made one for me when I was born," Ethan explained. "I wanted our child to have the same." Josephine gifted him with a new leather-bound journal, knowing he liked to record ranch accounts and observations about the land. "For our family history," she told him, "so our children will know their story." As winter deepened, Ethan insisted on hiring more help at the ranch so he could remain close to home. Timothy brought his younger brother Elias to work as a second hand, allowing Ethan to focus on Josephine's needs as her time approached. In late March, a letter arrived addressed to Josephine, postmarked from Arizona Territory. She opened it with trembling fingers, Ethan watching carefully from across the table. "It's from the mining company," she said, scanning the contents. "They've found more of Vernon's belongings. There's a deed to land near Prescott and some personal papers they're forwarding." Ethan studied her face. "How do you feel about that?" Josephine considered the question honestly. "Like it's from another lifetime, I feel." "Nothing, really." She set the letter aside. "Vernon is the past. You and our baby are my future." Relief softened Ethan's expression. He still worried sometimes that ghosts of her first marriage haunted her, though she'd assured him repeatedly that Vernon's hold over her was long broken. On the first day of April 1885, as a spring storm rattled the windows of their expanded cabin, Josephine went into labor. The pains began slowly in the morning, intensifying by afternoon. Ethan sent Timothy racing for Dr. Jenkins while he helped Josephine through the increasingly powerful contractions. "You're doing beautifully," he encouraged, wiping her brow with a cool cloth. "So strong, my Josie." The doctor arrived as evening approached, bringing Mrs. Cartwright to assist. Ethan refused to leave Josephine's side despite convention dictating that childbirth was women's business. When Dr. Jenkins suggested he wait outside, Josephine clutched his hand. "He stays," she insisted through gritted teeth. "I need him." The labor stretched through the night, Josephine's strength tested to its limits. Dawn was breaking when Dr. Jenkins finally announced she was ready to push. Ethan supported her shoulders, murmuring constant encouragement as she bore down with the last of her energy. With a final, tremendous effort, their child entered the world, a robust boy with a shock of dark hair and a powerful cry. A son, Dr. Jenkins announced, cleaning and swaddling the infant. "A fine, healthy son, Mrs." Cartwright wiped tears from her eyes as she helped settle Josephine and assisted with the afterbirth. "He's beautiful, my dear. Absolutely beautiful." When the tiny bundle was placed in Josephine's arms, she felt a love so overwhelming it nearly stopped her breath. Ethan perched carefully on the bed beside them, one arm around his wife, one finger gently stroking his son's cheek. "He's perfect," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "You're perfect. I love you both so much." Josephine looked up at her husband, seeing his own tears mirrored in his eyes. "What shall we name him?" Ethan considered the small face. "What about James? After your father?" Fresh tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "James Ethan Yates," she said, testing the name. "It's perfect." In the gentle light of dawn, as Dr. Jenkins and Mrs. Cartwright quietly departed to give the new family privacy, Josephine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. 16 months earlier, she had lain bleeding and abandoned in a blizzard, certain her life was ending. Now she held new life in her arms, surrounded by love so pure and true, it seemed miraculous. "Penny for your thoughts," Ethan said softly, kissing her temple. "I was thinking about fate," Josephine replied, adjusting little James as he rooted against her breast. "How the worst moment of my life led me to the best." Ethan nodded. "I've thought the same. If I hadn't delayed in town that day, if I'd taken the main road instead of the cutback. If Drummer hadn't sensed me in the snow," Josephine added. "So many chances for our paths never to cross." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Makes me believe in Providence." Josephine looked down at their son, now nursing contentedly. "I think I do too." The years that followed brought abundant blessings to the Yates family. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's determined spirit. When he was 2, a sister joined the family, Caroline Josephine, named for both the past and present, a bridge between Ethan's first love and his enduring one. The ranch prospered, expanding to include better grazing lands and improved housing for their growing staff. Ethan's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread throughout the territory, bringing increased business and stability. Josephine continued working part-time at the general store even after the children came, eventually becoming Mrs. Cartwright's partner when the older woman decided to semi-retire. Silver Reef weathered the mining industry's inevitable boom and bust cycles, transforming from a bustling silver town to a more sustainable community based on ranching and commerce. The Yates family became pillars of this evolution, Ethan serving terms on the town council while Josephine helped establish the town's first proper school. On crisp winter evenings, when the children were tucked into bed, Ethan and Josephine would sometimes sit on their porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms. They would gaze at the vast starlit sky and marvel at the unlikely path that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked on one such evening, the 10th anniversary of the day he'd found her in the snow. "Coming west with Vernon, all you suffered?" Josephine considered the question, her hand entwined with his. "How could I regret what led me to you, to our children? Even the darkest parts of my journey had purpose, though I couldn't see it then." She thought of the small wooden box she kept in their bedroom drawer containing Vernon's wedding ring, the deed to the Arizona property they'd never claimed, and a lock of her mother's hair. Tangible reminders of a past that had shaped but no longer defined her. "Besides," she added with a smile, "not many love stories begin with a gunshot and a blizzard." Ethan laughed, pulling her closer. "True enough, though I'd prefer our children find less dramatic paths to happiness." "They will write their own stories," Josephine said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Just as we have written ours." As if on cue, Caroline's voice called from inside the house, requesting one more story before sleep. Ethan and Josephine exchanged smiles before rising to fulfill their daughter's wish. Later, after the house had quieted, and they lay entwined in the darkness of their bedroom, Ethan traced the scar on Josephine's shoulder, a silvery reminder of how close he'd come to never knowing her. "I found a treasure in that snowdrift," he murmured against her skin. "And I found salvation," Josephine replied, turning to face him. "My cowboy who saved me from the cold." Their lips met in a kiss as familiar as breathing, yet still filled with wonder. The enduring miracle of two broken souls who had found wholeness together. Outside, snow began to fall softly, but within the walls of the home they'd built, all was warmth, love, and the profound peace that comes from weathering life's harshest storms and emerging stronger for the journey.